everyone. Welcome to this episode of Understanding People, brought to you by Get Abstract. My name is Kirsten Miller-Doberman, and I'm back as your host. So this season, we have been talking every episode with a different author, expert around the theme of how to something in your work or professional life that you can do to understand yourself better, understand others, and really build a foundation of strength and stability during a year that has been anything but stable or predictable. That's what we're doing here with this series. And I'm very, very excited today to welcome an incredible guest who's going to be talking to us about how to build resilience. I think no matter what level you are in your organization, this is something that you can absolutely relate to. I know that I can. And even outside of a business perspective, it's something that we all personally can work on, grow, and develop so that we can, just live a more full, meaningful, and productive life. My guest today is Leah Weiss. She is a PhD. She's a researcher, a professor, a consultant, and author of the book, How We Work, Live Your Purpose, Reclaim Your Sanity, and Embrace the Daily Grind, which I love. She teaches compassionate leadership courses at Stanford Graduate School of Business and is a principal teacher and founding faculty for Stanford's Compassion Cultivation Program, which was conceived by the Dalai Lama. Pretty cool. She also directs compassion education and scholarship at Hope Lab, an Ahmed-Yar Group research and development nonprofit focused on resilience. So without further ado, let's welcome Leah. Hey, so nice to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation, and this topic is so timely.
Yeah, and that's actually exactly what I wanted to ask you, because the book came out a few years ago, but how have you seen its increased relevance now, especially with the pandemic?
Yeah, it's one of the silver linings of COVID, if we're going to use that cliche, I think, is that we are understanding that mental health and well-being aren't these tangential topics, but they're key. They're critical to every organizational strategy and to individuals, teams. And so the main difference I've been seeing since the book came out is now, rather than kind of looking at these topics as a nice to have, they're much more pervasively seen as a must work on.
Yeah, and what motivated you to write the book in the first place?
So I had spent about a decade going in and out of various graduate programs in education and clinical training, and then long meditation retreats and 100-day, 6-month retreats. And my focus was really around how can we bring in these strategies for resilience into high burnout occupations. I started with healthcare, and to this day have spent a lot of time in that sector, among others. And, one of the things that was also really of interest to me during that period of time, when I was writing the book, I had 3 children under 5. And so a lot of the resources that had gotten me through the decade before didn't make a lot of sense. There's not a lot of retreating possible and quiet and contemplative, like time to carve out. So I got really interested in what can we do on the fly? What can we do with mindset? How can we use this research coming out about emotional intelligence strategies in a way that makes sense? And, now more than ever, in the United States, over 3 million women have left the workforce as a result of the pandemic. And many of them are burned out, are citing just untenable environments, and of course the needs in the home and in managing gender pay gaps and so forth has contributed, especially in this country where we don't have a lot of support for childcare and so forth. So that's also always been a big part of the kinds of questions I'm asking, or how can people who already experience friction in the workplace because of gender or race build both understanding from allies and people around them, but also, be understood by their organizations at the systems level, and also have, that's been a big part of the corporate work that I've done of trainings and resilience for women and for people of color and so forth. So we can hire diversely, but what does it mean to build a team that can understand across difference? So those are really important topics to me.
Yeah, absolutely essential. And I think any leader or manager, anyone leading a team will say, yep, those are all the issues I'm dealing with exactly right now. And I want to get your input on how to build that resilience individually, as you mentioned, using some of the tools in your book, and then also how a leader can help do that within their team and create a system, as you mentioned, that is much more holistic and sustainable over the long term. So, from an individual perspective, we hear about mindfulness now all the time, which I, as someone who mental health is very important to me too, I'm like, yes, great. But can you define exactly what mindfulness is? And you talk specifically about three different kinds and explain what the benefit of mindfulness is.
Yeah. So, one of my favorite definitions of mindfulness is also one of the simplest, the intentional use of attention. And one of what I like about that is people can often conflate mindfulness with meditation, with having your eyes closed, with your break, with what you do before, during, and after work, which then by necessity makes the topic less relevant about how do you be mindful in a difficult conversation or with your
Yeah.
team or with managing unconscious bias. So when we talk about mindfulness, it's important to remember that it's a practice that's embodied. And also, I do a lot of work in the book talking about updating people's perception of the science of emotion regulation, that actually our emotions live in our bodies, and so skillful ways to relate to them. People in research use the term manage. I don't love the idea manage emotions because it makes me
Yeah.
think of suppression, which is the one strategy we don't want to do, but
Yeah.
work with emotions. So I think, at the individual level, recognizing embodiment and the role that it plays in our work lives, and honoring the body with, rest and nutrition, taking breaks to move intermittently, and also understanding that when we do that, the quality of work and thinking and communication goes way up, which is often it is paradoxical or hard for some people to grasp onto. I don't have time to think about or do,
Yeah.
when actually, if you don't do it, your quality of work is going to go off a cliff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and paying attention to attention and how it functions, how purpose, and one of the things we've talked a lot about in the context of burnout is when our values are transgressed in the workplace. So let's say healthcare is an easy example to take in the context of the pandemic. Don't have enough PPE, don't have enough uh, time or people or resources and so forth. The moral injury that comes leads to burnout. Well, we actually have that across sectors. So what parts of
Mm.
your role or processes that you're engaging in frustrate you and make you feel like you don't have impact? Those are the things that drag us down. It's not just hours spent working. So a lot of what I recommend people do is at the individual level, pay attention, know your values, know your purpose, know when your energy wanes, know when your values are transgressed, understand your interior emotional landscape, which is complex these days. We're all going through so much, and navigate each other, like with each other in groups. And people may have very different ways of communicating what's happening for them or how they want to be supported. So that's where the individual starts to bridge into the team. So emotional intelligence isn't just about ourselves internally, it's about the interaction. And mindfulness improves all of the aspects of emotional intelligence, interpersonal as well as within yourself. So a little bit long-winded, but it's a great question that you're formulating. So
Yeah, yeah, no, it is so important. And I know that if anyone is listening who has had the experience of becoming more mindful in their work and their regular life has seen the benefits of it. And one tiny little way that someone recommended to me in a presentation or one time to practice mindfulness was mindfully brush your teeth.
Mhm.
Like use that
Mhm.
practice because I mean, it's like that's 2 minutes in the morning where you're brushing and then your mind's going in 1,000 directions or you're doing something else while you're brushing. But like just stand there and mindfully think about the action of brushing your teeth. And it's just a way to start to focus the mind, that attention to attention, right? As you mentioned. So I'm just throwing that out there. If anyone wants to use that
Yeah.
one, you know, to how to
Yeah.
break into that mindfulness.
Yeah, and find, the activities you're doing so you don't have to take a break to pay attention. You can
Yeah.
do it on your commute. You can pay attention to how you're feeling in the context of a conversation. You can, if you manage to build in time to work out or take a walk or even do a quick walk around your neighborhood or block, not letting your thoughts spin out and following them, but bringing your attention back into the body is a way to ground yourself with mindfulness, even amidst your other activities.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk about another component of building resilience, and that's something you talk about in the book and how to fail well. You know, we are all going to make mistakes, some small, some massive. And especially if you're someone who's a leader and then you're responsible, you know, failing well is a skill that we all need to build. It's necessary. It's absolutely necessary. Why are we so afraid of failure? And what tools enable us to start to be able to handle it better?
Yeah. It's I think one of the issues is, we often see in organizations that people talk about failing, we wanna learn from failure, but the actual experience people have when something goes off track is blame and shame and retribution, and so what's set up around them is if they start to see this is going off track or I have concerns, you are disincentivized to step up and call out a potential problem. So you actually get into scenarios where things like safety or just deadline drift and so forth aren't called out earlier if you don't create a culture where actually when problems are surfaced that people don't blame the messenger, but they look together at trying to understand the causes and effects and learning. And I think one of the things is recognizing, like if you look at the neuroscience of self-criticism, that many of us who've been educated with self-criticism as a main kind of motivational factor, that we think what motivates us to do more work and better work and stick with it is beating up on ourselves. But
Mhm.
actually, what we see in the research and the neuroscience of this is when you're beating up on yourself, if your brain experiences that as though you are getting a threat from the external environment. But the difference is self-criticism can follow you across day and night. So it's like you're getting attacked, but from someone you can never escape. Um, so it's the same threat response, pain response, overwhelm, and then we can't problem solve.
Yeah.
So I think that's what we need to look at. What are we doing to equip ourselves to relearn this habit, which we can, to look for forward, growth oriented approaches to change cultures, and also for people to be able to talk about the struggle they have with self-criticism in a workplace and imposter syndrome. Like if you can put
Yeah.
that stuff on the table, then you can have really powerful conversations where people can support each other and focus the attention on the problem that needs solving instead of the dynamics between people and blame and hiding out and so forth.
Yeah. I'd love to then shift now gears to how someone can help cultivate that within their team, especially remotely, because slowly some people are maybe coming back into the office, but still so much work is done virtually and is probably going to be a lot more in the future. Um, given that, how can leaders try to plug into this, build this emotional intelligence, really connect with their team members so that if there is this overwhelm and this self-criticism going on, that they can, restore, help their team reflect, build resilience? How do they do that?
Yeah, I think one of the terms that makes a lot of sense to focus on that I've been working in organizations with a lot recently is understanding the research on psychological safety, understanding belonging, understanding how we create community, and also knowing that a lot of the kind of organic opportunities for those that we're used to, the kind of interstitial moments between meetings where we connect with one another in a virtual work environment, don't exist. So you have to thoughtfully, mindfully pay attention to where your attention goes and create those forums. So some of the very practical things we've been recommending for teams are things like make sure that you, in a team environment, at least once a week, carve out 10-15 minutes to do a check-in about just how people are doing in their life. Because without mutual awareness, then there's no opportunity for compassion or support or rejiggering work. And there may not be a willingness from someone who's struggling to reach out if they don't have that comfort level with the team. As a lot of people now have been hired into new jobs that they've never been in person with those that they're working with. So you don't have that baseline relationship. So if having these very simple kind of check-ins, what's distracting you, what's worrying
Mm.
you this week, so we know, then you can, I have a very practical example. My mother-in-law is in hospice right now. And I was telling my team this morning, I'm like, and one day this week, I'm just going to have to duck out of every commitment, right, to help support the kids and everything. So they know, and then they can reach out to me. And some of them have, with a very kind of succinct, personal, like, let me know what I can do emotionally or practically, the kinds of support we offer each other. Someone I did a presentation for last week sent a DoorDash certificate. These are the kinds of little things that it's just like so thoughtful. But if nobody knows each other and what's happening, because you just log in your meeting and then it's check-ins on progress and what are we going to do? And okay, everybody go. Where do
Mhm.
you find that connection point so you don't have the chance to build belonging and resilience? And you have to start with psychological safety, though. You have to do the work for the teams that have a lot of interpersonal stress. You may not have the baseline comfort to share that kind of information with each other. So you have to get at those dynamics and do that work, even if it's remote, and invest the time. So that's the other,
Yeah.
I think, reality.
Yeah. And I love that you shared the example that you did about being vulnerable yourself as a leader. And I would love for you to just talk briefly about how important that is, and also being the person to encourage people to, because it's a hard, being vulnerable, especially as a leader, is hard, but why is it so worth it?
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it is people know when we're withholding something. And if we become suspicious to them. And I think one of the complaints we see over and over again in workplaces is frustration with lack of transparency, lack of humanity in leaders. And so it's a
Yeah.
risk. It's often not people's comfort zone. But if
Yeah.
you look at the research, even in compassionate organizations and who can do well in difficult environments, the modeling of the leaders to share their own struggle, their anxiety, their grief. And I've been hearing more and more examples of this when I'm talking to folks in organizations, of someone on the leadership team doing an internal, um, you know, communication and just sharing their own personal struggle with mental health this year, or loss or grief. And it normalizes for everyone
Yeah.
that we're allowed
Yeah.
to be human. but I think people worry that if leaders do that, then you're basically sanctioning now work, nobody has to get anything done. That's not realistic. What actually happens when people are afraid to connect with each other, that's when they don't get work done.
Bingo. I just love that you confirmed that and that you also confirm it with the research in your book, because it's overcoming that fears and taking that leap of faith, that risk, but it really builds so much incredible humanity, as you said. And I think if this year has shown us anything, it's that, hey, we are really all in this together. Like, this has really been a great equalizer in many ways. And we're all human and we're all facing this struggle together.
All doing it
Um,
together. Oh, sorry.
yeah.
I was just going to share one example. The first month of the pandemic, my cousin, who was a physician in New York City, passed away from COVID, and I was starting to do presentations to a number of healthcare organizations. At that point, who wanted, someone to come in, an expert to talk about resilience and mental health and so forth. And I started each, presentation with a slide of in memory of Dr. Larry Glassberg, and
Mm,
acknowledging the human fear and grief and so forth that all of these people working in healthcare were going through. And I can't tell you how many follow-up emails or comments we got, because it wasn't, it's one example out of so many, tragically. But the acknowledgement piece, I think, really goes a long way to helping people understand that we're in this together, and we see the humanity of the people who are in roles where they have to compartmentalize a lot.
yeah. Yeah.
And actually, in some ways, that's all of us, even those of us who are not in healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an awesome example. Um, Last question for you, Leah, and I'm so thankful for everything you shared. And I could talk to you for 30 more minutes, but we will wrap this up. And I want to ask you what you are looking forward to in 2021.
Yeah, we are planning to do a good amount of camping over the summer with the
Oh,
kids, and
nice.
time in nature, unplugging. That is resting, is one piece, and then on the more active side, I'm really excited to see the orientation that so many companies are paying towards mental health and resilience. And I'm really excited to get out there and put these strategies together so that people can come back and, live their lives in a more meaningful, healthy way. And I feel really confident that this year is going to be a lot of rebuilding and learning.
Yeah, me too. Wonderful. Leah, thank you so much again for your time and sharing with us. We really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation. The time flew by for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank all of you so much for watching. If there was something in this video that you feel that a friend, a colleague has to hear, then please share that with them. This is why we produce these videos and want to get this content out there so that you yourself can understand you better, your team members better, and we can all build a world post-COVID that is more productive, more free, more meaningful, more fulfilling for everyone. So thank you very much for watching. We'll see you very soon for another episode of Understanding People. Have a wonderful day wherever you're joining us from. We'll see you soon.